So for those of you who don't know, I'm Lisa Mangum. I'm managing editor of Shadow Mountain, the national imprint for Deseret Book. I've been in publishing almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years this June. So by day, I'm managing editor. By night, I write young adult love stories and contemporary romance. Weekends, I'm obsessed with supernatural. Thank you. I'm not even going to apologize for that. Most of my professional career, I have been in charge of the slush pile. You all know that term, right? You all have been in the slush somewhere. So I've seen a lot of really good query letters, and I've seen a lot of really bad query letters. And so I put together this presentation to kind of help you walk through and practice your query letter, or sometimes it's called a cover letter, that goes with your submission. It's often the part of the process that writers cry about the most, because you have to summarize your beautiful 100,000-word novel that you have labored over for years into like 2 paragraphs, and that is terrifying and it's awful, and you know that your whole career is based on it, and it's terrifying. So I'm hopefully we will dispel some of that and give you some real practical tips on how to approach your query letter with the right kind of information. And then we're actually going to do a workshop next hour. LeBeau Parker and I are going to actually sit down with a pen and workshop your query letters for you. So if everybody can see, tell me if this gets really fuzzy, and feel free, honestly, people on this side, if you want to move over. I feel like I'm right in the middle of everything. So here's the truth about your query letter. It's a professional document. You have to have some of your personality in it, but you have to remember, it's like your resume. It's what I'm going to use to decide if I want to hire you to write books for me, because then I will pay you royalties, right? That's how that employment works, and then everybody wins. Boy, you can't see that at all, can you? What if we turn the lights off a little bit more? Can somebody in the back hit the lights just a little bit more? Is that way better? Is it at least a little bit better?
In the back, raise your hand if you can see.
It feels fuzzy up here, but maybe my glasses are just dirty.
You're all nervous to move. Ready, set,
nervous to not be able to take notes.
I will have LTUE post this presentation on the Facebook group afterwards so that you can look at these slides in detail and at your leisure, if that would be helpful. Because it's hard to take notes in the dark. So just sit back and relax and let the information wash over you. And then if you have questions, I can either email this to you, or like I said, I'll put it on the LTUE group. So this is when you're approaching your query letter, you have to think of it as, this is your resume for why I should hire you to be a writer. So those are the kinds of things I want to know. So don't skirt the issue. Don't try to be coy. Tell me what I need to know. And the 3 things I need to know, I stole this from one of my agent friends, Pam, who said, your structure is the hook, the book, and the cook, which I thought was brilliant because it's easy to remember and it rhymes. And it really is just the 3 paragraphs that I need for a really solid query letter. So we're going to talk about all 3 of those things in some detail. You don't have to have these in this exact same order. If you want to start with the cook paragraph, you can. If you want to put your hook a little bit lower, you can. There's still some flexibility, but at the end of the day, I should be able to identify all of this information. So the first part is the hook. This is your fast, quick elevator pitch, the thing that's going to get my attention the most. There's a number of different ways that you can approach your hook. It's also sometimes called a log line. It's sometimes called a tagline. You'll hear lots of kind of different industry terminology for it, but it all boils down to the same kind of thing. It's a quick, 1 sentence, 1 phrase, sort of fastball pitch to get my attention and make me want to ask more questions. So one option could be a movie poster tagline. If they made a movie of your book and put beautiful people on the poster, what would that cute little tagline say? For Aliens, it was, "In space, no one can hear you scream," right? That's intriguing, that's interesting, and it just had the picture of the little pod opening up. So think about the visual of what your book might look like and what that tagline might be. You can also do sort of an X plus Y kind of thing. It's Game of Thrones with dinosaurs. It's a real book. I kind of really want to read it bad. But it's that kind of thing. I know Game of Thrones. I know dinosaurs. I would not have put those 2 things together. I'm really intrigued. I'm going to ask questions. It's just a quick X plus Y. Because the goal is, you want to create curiosity in the reader. And at the end of the day, I'm your first reader. So you want something that's quick and easy and memorable that is going to make me say, whoa, tell me more about that. Or I've never thought about it that way. Or those are two of my favorite things. I can't wait to read a book that promises me more of what I love. And you want it, the goal is to get me in the right frame of mind to read your book. So if you're writing a horror novel, you want to put me in mind, use horror novel comparables so that I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be a scary story. And I'm already, before I engage with page 1, in the right kind of mindset. You guys do this all the time when you go to Barnes & Noble to buy books, right? You go to the romance section because you're kind of in the mood for a romance, and you're going to look, and so before you even pick up a book, you know what you're getting, what you're signing up for. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, they kiss at the end. That's what you want. And I want that same thing. I want the bookstore experience to come to me in the query letter. And that often comes because the first step is kind of getting that quick look. So who here has seen or read Cujo? Right? Awesome. Most of you haven't. That's okay. What if I told you it was Jaws with paws? Right? Do you know what this story is about now?
Yes.
Not even having read it. Have you made a decision whether or not you would read this book? Based on 3 words. Right? That's the kind of interest that I'm looking for. We all understand about Jaws. We've all had experiences with big scary dogs. We kind of are like, yes, I would read a book about that. Here's another example, Titanic. I was actually watching a documentary about it because I'm obsessed with the Titanic story. And James Cameron said, this is exactly how he pitched the project to the studio. He said, it's Romeo and Juliet on this boat. And he held up that picture. And they gave him like $1 gazillion and he made that movie. Right? But that's what that boils down to. It's Romeo and Juliet on the sinking ship Titanic. It can also be as easy as snakes on a plane. Right? Please tell me I'm not the only one who has seen snakes on a plane. Awesome, you are my people. You don't have to be crazy clever. It can also be pretty truthful. Did somebody mention Sharknado? Yes. That's one of my favorite franchises. I'm sorry, it just makes me laugh. Okay, so those are some examples of like movie poster taglines, some really quick X plus Y kinds of structures to get you thinking about how to approach your story. You'll notice that they're not all book-to-book comparisons. You can do that, but you don't have to. It can be a book to a movie. It could be a TV to a movie. It could be the writing style of author A versus the writing style of author B. My friend was writing a book, and she pitched it as Breaking Bad in Marie Antoinette's court. I would read that book. And so that's what I'm looking for, are 2 really, really concrete, interesting things that you put together in a way that I haven't seen before. So if you have a really, really good, strong tagline, it can even be on the cover of your book to help people understand and read about it. I'm going to have to read these to you because I don't believe you're ever going to be able to read this. So this is a book from Jane Yolen called Briar Rose, and on the cover, this is why I bought it, it says, the bright tale of the Sleeping Beauty, the dark tale of the Holocaust, twined together in a story you will never forget. And I heard a whoa from the front row. That's the goal. That is exactly what you want your tagline to do. To have the person go, whoa. Okay? Here's another example. This is the Girls at the Kingfisher Club. I read this a couple years ago. I picked it up on the back because it says, it's the 12 dancing princesses in the jazz age. See? Everybody's like, oh, that sounds really cool. It is really cool. It was one of my favorite books that year. Here is Ruins of Lace. The cover says, a novel of France, freedom, and forbidden lace. Now, I understand all of those words, but throwing forbidden in there, super interesting. I had no idea that at one point in France's history, Flemish lace was outlawed and had to be smuggled across the border, and if you were found in possession of it and you were not aristocracy, they would kill you. For not even wearing it, for the mere possession of Flemish lace, they would kill you. That was a fascinating book. And it's what caught my eye, the idea of forbidden lace. So your hook is strictly to promise me something really unusual and interesting, and to incite that kind of curiosity to say, whoa, I got to find out what you mean about that. I've got to turn the book over. I've got to read the first page. I've got to at least engage a little bit more. It's the invitation to take the first step on this journey with you. That's all the job the hook has to do. And the best way you'll know it when you have it, when you talk to all of your friends about it and they all start giving you the same kind of response. For Hourglass Door, which is my first published novel, when it came out, I spent that summer every Saturday at a Costco, shilling my book, because that's what you do as an author. And it was a great training ground for practicing my hook, because people were there at Costco not to buy my book, but to get 5 gallons of mayonnaise. And I had to stop them. I had like 2 seconds as they're walking past to tell them what my book was about and make them stop. And I tried a lot of really dumb things. And until I finally sort of found one that worked. And this is what I use all the time. Here's my hook pitch for Hourglass Door. I say, it's a love story with a mystery that dates back to Leonardo da Vinci. And the people who stopped, that was enough for them to stop. And I'd say 90% of the people who stopped walked away with my book. And that's all I was asking it to do. I don't know if they went on to buy mayonnaise or not. I didn't really care. That's what I wanted. And the people that walked past, well, they weren't going to like my book anyway. So why bother selling it to them? So that's what I'm looking for. Okay. Questions about the hook? Everybody, yes.
How long should it be? Just a sentence?
Yeah, it's just as pithy and short as you can do it. The shorter the better, because then you can tweet it and hashtag it, and you can put up, and it's your instinctive knee-jerk reaction when people say, "What's your book about?" And I'm like, "It's about a love story with a mystery that dates back to Leonardo da Vinci." It's like that's the answer that I say all the time. So the longer version is what we're going to talk about next. So your hook is going to be really, really short. So the book is your next paragraph. So in your query letter, your hook may actually only be technically the first sentence of your first paragraph. It may just be something that you tuck in at the end when you're talking about genre and word count, because it is so short. The bulk of your query letter is going to be where you talk about how awesome your book is and how unique it is. And this is where you give me the summary. It's like the back cover copy of your story. And there's 4 things I should be able to identify in your query letter after I'm done reading it. And these are the 4 things. You do not have to have them in this order, but I should be able to identify who the hero is, right? Who your main character is, what the goal is, what at least one obstacle is, the more the merrier, but at least one obstacle, and what the stakes are. What's the consequence of failure? What are we playing for? Why should I care? Often in query letters, that's the part that gets left out. People are really good at identifying the hero and the goal and some obstacles, and then they forget to tell me why it matters. What happens if the hero doesn't save the girl? And we'll talk a little, I've got some examples and I can show you. So, the other thing that you'll have in your book paragraph is you're going to want to mention your genre, because that becomes really important for marketing. And as a publisher, as we look at our portfolio and say, you know what our lineup is really missing is an urban fantasy. And oh, here comes a manuscript that says it's an urban fantasy. Awesome, let's read that one first. So I need to know the genre, the title. Even if it's a dumb title, it's okay. You have to at least have a title somewhere. I have seen more than one query letter that just says Untitled. No, sorry. You wrote 100,000 words. You can at least cobble together 3 words for a title, or I don't know, 1 word. And your word count. It doesn't. Please don't have it be. My manuscript is approximately 83,417 words. Okay, that is not approximate. That is exact. And you don't have to give me an exact word count. You can say it's approximately 87,000 words. All I need to know on word count is, are you in the ballpark for the genre that you are writing in? middle grade, yes.
No, go ahead and finish.
Oh, I was going to say, like, if you've written a 100,000 word middle grade that's not fantasy, I'm really going to question if you know your audience, if you know who you're talking to. I'm going to worry that you have overwritten that book, and it's going to be more work on my part to cut it down to where it needs to be.
So is there a guide somewhere that gives suggested word counts for different genres?
Yeah, suggested word counts. They're going to be really flexible. So there is no one hard and fast kind of rule, because there's always a book that will have an exception. But generally, if you are in the ballpark, middle grade will be like 45 to 60,000 words. Young adult will be like 70 to 100. And then adult fiction will be like, can be 100 plus. If you're doing epic fantasy, then you can do like 125 and up. And if you're Brandon Sanderson, you get all the words in the world. He's earned that right. But there's lots of variation in that. But if you're doing a lot of world building, usually you can edge a little higher on a word count scale. If you're doing contemporary young adult, you may only have 60,000 words, and that might be fine. If you're a really sparse kind of writer, if your prose is really stripped down, you may still be able to tell a perfectly beautiful story in 60,000 words and have it be for young adults or even adults. So I usually say, if you are writing for young adult or older, if you aim for about 80,000 words, you will most likely hit that sweet spot, because that's enough to tell a really decent story. And if it's a little thin, you can always add a little bit more. And if it's a little over, we can always cut it down. But that's kind of, if you're just starting out and you're like, I don't even know where to shoot for about 80,000 words, and I think you will be pleasantly surprised at how accurate you are. Yes?
Do you prefer the approximation to hundreds or thousands?
Thousands. Approximations to 1,000. So it's 95,000 words. It's 92,000 words. That'll be fine. Because like I said, really, it's an instantaneous glance across the word count to say, yep, that sounds about right. For the genre and the story that they're telling, 90,000 sounds about right. I can trust that the author knows what he's doing. That's all the job is for that. Okay. So we're going to talk in detail about the 4 elements of the book: the hero, the goal, the obstacle, and the stake. So here are some examples that I just made up because I did. So the first thing is, tell me about your protagonist. Tell me something about their character or their conflict, if you can. So the examples I have on here, I just put down 16-year-old Melissa hates her mother. As a half-elf, half-orc wizard, William's life isn't easy. Florence may have 80 years under her belt, a bad back, bad eyesight, and bad knees, but she isn't going to let that stop her. So this is a way to introduce your main character. I know everybody's name, right? It's going to be Melissa and William and Florence, and that's going to tell me also their age. In some cases, I've given you an age of the protagonist, but I've tried to give you a little sense of their personality, and I've also tried to start to hint at what the conflict is going to be. Melissa hates her mother. William's life isn't easy because he's a half-breed. Florence, you don't want to meet Florence in a dark alley, even though she's 80. So it starts to just give me a little bit of a sense of who I'm going to be following in this journey. Okay, now I need you to tell me what it is that your hero wants. So, for example, maybe your hero is in a quest to recover the stolen amulet of thieving. Or maybe your hero wants to make it through one day without being laughed at. Sorry, Marriott wants me to connect to the internet. I don't want to do that. Thanks so much, though. Oh, it's fine. I like this example because it's your goal can be internal. In fact, your hero should have an external and an internal goal, right, for the story, because as you arc him through that story, he's going to come across obstacles that are both internal and external. And he's going to need to find a solution that is both internal and external. So you can talk about both an internal and external goal. And maybe it is that he just wants to get through the day without being laughed at. That also tells me that it's going to be more of a character study than an action novel. That's helpful. Maybe you must find a way home. Or maybe, what did I put? Oh, you have to save the universe from a space invasion. So in all of those examples, you know what kind of book it's going to be, whether it's going to be a fantasy quest, whether it's going to be a character study, whether it's going to be a science fiction space opera. I'm hinting at genre with that as well. Okay? At least one obstacle. Tell me what is standing in your hero's way. Why doesn't the hero just wake up in the morning and save the universe from a space invasion? What's in his way? So maybe it's a madman bent on revenge who is also going after the same goal, like the stolen amulet of thieving. Maybe it's self-doubt and fear. Again, it's that example of that internal obstacle that is holding your hero back. Maybe it's an army of brain-hungry zombies. Zombies, what are you going to do? Or maybe it's a fellow archaeologist searching for the same treasure, Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? So at least one obstacle. The more, and as I mentioned before, the more the merrier, because it's going to show me that's where your plot is, that's where your conflict is. And conflict is the engine that drives your story. So the more you can talk about the conflict that your character is going through, the more engaged and interested I am going to be, and the more likely I am to want to read the first page of the first chapter, and hopefully the whole book. Okay? Stakes. Tell me what happens if your hero fails to overcome the obstacle. This is what we're playing for. Or else all of Middle-earth will fall into shadow. So Frodo, let's take the Ring of Power to Mount Doom, battling his way across the land filled with Uruk-hai and orcs, or else all of Middle-earth will fall into shadow. Okay, there's a lot more to Lord of the Rings than just that. But that's enough to get me interested. That's enough in a query letter to say this is the bare bones of the story that I'm going to be telling you for Lord of the Rings. Either she will die or her brother will. That's a good example because it emphasizes the choice that your character has to make. Often in pitches, I'll ask, after, we're talking about the book and we're trying to figure out, I'm trying to get more information, and I'll say, tell me about the choice the character makes at the climactic moment of the novel. What is it that they have to do? And one yesterday, I don't know if the person is here, I apologize for just using you as an example without permission, but we were talking about that choice at the end, and it said something about how she would have to embrace the shadows and defeat the bad guy. And I'm like, awesome, what's the downside to that? It sounds bad, but if it means you defeat the bad guy, that's not much of a choice. I'm expecting the hero to make that sacrifice. Well, then she said, oh, well, if she does that, then she's going to turn into a demon herself. Better. That is a better choice. So she has to choose between defeating the bad guy or becoming a demon herself. Then what do? Now that's much more engaging than just saying, oh, yeah, she has to do the hard thing to defeat the bad guy. That's not a choice. That's plot. That's expected. So to think really carefully about the choice your character makes at the end. Maybe you'll learn the true meaning of Christmas. It could be a good thing, right? It could be a positive thing. Scrooge in A Christmas Carol learns the true meaning of Christmas. That's what happens at the end. That's the payoff. That's what we're playing for. Those are the stakes. Those are the kinds of things I want to know. In a query letter, it is perfectly acceptable to tell me the ending. In fact, you should probably tell me the ending, because I have so many manuscripts come across my desk, and I have so many things I have to do that I don't have time to be teased with, oh, well, you'll have to read it to find out. And I'm like, no, I don't. But if I know from the very first page from that query letter that the payoff is going to be worth it, that the story that you are promising me is going to be exciting and interesting and life-changing, and this is going to be the jewel at the end of the Cracker Jack box, then you better believe I'm more interested in reading all 300 pages of your manuscript. So it's promise me the journey. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, one of the other things that I need to know about your book is what genre it is in. I suspect most of you already know the genre you are writing in, which is awesome. But the more you can drill down into even the subgenres, the better it can be. There's this great website called bookcountry.com. If you go to the read and review tab, there's a genre map that you can click on romance, and it will show you all of the subgenres beneath it and examples of books that are in that category. So even, for example, here on science fiction, if I can read this very smallly, it says alternate history, cyberpunk, hard science fiction, military science fiction, soft science fiction, space core. Those are just some examples. Those are all different, and they have unique kinds of things. And if you pitch your story as a steampunk versus a diesel punk, that's a distinction that actually matters, even though those are really, really narrow definitions of punk kind of books. So do some research on your genre. This will also help you come up with really good comps for your book, because that can help you with your tagline. And that's the first question we always look at. Well, one of the first questions we always ask when we're evaluating a new project is, well, what are the comps? What is it like? What did those books sell? When did they come out? So if you can find some really good comps that sold 10 or 15,000 copies in a year, or that got really good reviews or had really good positive reader response, and you say, yeah, my book is like that, then I'll say, good, because I wanted that book, and I didn't get it, but I can get yours, maybe I'll get yours. So that is important to think about comps. Yes, in the back.
Is there any place that we can find out how many copies of books sold?
Not easily. She's asking, where can you find out exactly how many, like the hard numbers of how much things have sold. The Nielsen Book Scan is a website that does that, but you have to have a subscription, and usually publishers just use it. But one way you can use, an easy way to tell is if you look at the Amazon rankings and just say, oh, I'm just drilling down, here's fiction and literature for teens, here's, science fiction, here's cyberpunk, and oh, this book is number 1,200 in books overall. That's usually anything. I think anything under 5,000 is a really good indicator that book is doing well on Amazon. And so you don't have to provide numbers of those other books, but if you just sort of generally get a sense like, oh, and this book has 300 5-star reviews, that's really that people are talking about it. Does that help?
Yeah.
And then we will do all of the hard lookup on the hard numbers, and you can make me do that. One other place that you can practice looking at this kind of book paragraph, so to speak, and also to practice your pitches is the Publishers Weekly Deal Report, which they publish every week, obviously, Publishers Weekly, and this is where they say which agent bought which book for which house. And they only have like a sentence to explain what's going on. And it's a great place to start analyzing how agents and publishers talk about their books when they buy the book. So for example, here's one that this was a while back, but I just pulled it right just out of the PW report. And it says, LeLou Loganberry's Mystic Cooking, a middle grade novel about a young master chef opening a new restaurant offering high-end cuisine to people in all income brackets, while she tries to repay a loan shark and help her absentee mentor. So it's one sentence, and it does a ton of things. So for example, here it tells us who our hero is. It's LeLou Loganberry, and she's a young master chef, so it gives us her name and a little bit, some sort of description to hang that on. It tells us her goal. She wants to offer high-end cuisine to all people. We know a couple of her obstacles. She's young. That's going to be an obstacle, right? She's a young master chef. And there's a loan shark somewhere. She's got a debt to repay. And then her stakes is something bad is going to happen to her mentor. Yes?
Is this kind of like the hook where shorter is better, or is it okay to expound into it?
This, for me, this is more is more on the book paragraph. That's where you're going to spend most of your real estate on your query letter is talking about your book. Now, it's great if you can sum it up in a sentence like this, but it's hard to do, and the query letter is not always the place where you need to be that succinct. This is where the query letter, I want to know a little bit more about LeLou Loganberry. How young is she? A little bit about her background. What's the business with the loan shark and the absentee mentor? You've got room to expand on those points because that's the job of the query letter. The job of the deal report is to cram it all into one sentence to say, Agent X bought this book and here's what it's about.
Okay, thank you.
Here's one other example. Oh, and it also tells me the genre, that it's middle grade. Here's one other example. Cronin is a science fiction historical adventure about a college student named Mia Yoshida. I think it's a little blurry even from here.
Mirai Yoshida.
There you go. Who winds up stranded in 1864 Japan after a project for her time travel studies class goes awry. So I totally read this book. Love time travel. So we know our hero. She's a college student. We know her goal. It isn't stated explicitly, but we can assume that it's to return to her own time, right? Because she's stranded there. The obstacle is something very bad has happened to the time travel study, so it may not be as easy to get back as it was to get to 1864 Japan. So maybe she's going to have to fix something or find something or solve something to get the time machine mechanism working again. And the stakes, she'll be stranded there if she doesn't get back. This one is a little bit sketchier, and I would look at that and say, okay, well, tell me more about like the time travel. Is she there by herself? Is she there with friends? Who is she trying to get back to? Is her parents ailing? Does she have a boyfriend back home? A little bit more about what the urgency is to get back home beyond just getting back home would be helpful in something like this, and is why in a query letter you would explain more like that. But and then we know the genre is science fiction, historical adventure. I'm going to skip this slide because I want to move on to this one. And it's already 9:30. Yeah. Okay, here's an example of this material in action. This is the other reason why a really, really good, well-written query letter is impressive. Because I just might take some of this and use it on the back cover of the book. And that makes my job easier. So this is Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Septis. Has anybody read this book? It's gorgeous. I highly recommend it. I love her work. So this is what's on the back cover. So pretend you are at the bookstore and you see this cover and you're like, oh, this sounds interesting. And you flip it over. This is what you read. I'm going to read this to you because it's hard to read on the screen. Have you ever wondered what a human life is worth? That morning, my brother's was worth a pocket watch. Lithuania, June 1941. 15-year-old Lena is preparing for art school and looking forward to summer. In the dark of night, there's a knock at the door, and life is forever changed. Soviet secret police arrest Lena, her mother, and her younger brother, tearing their family apart. The three are hauled from their home and thrown into cattle cars, where they soon discover their destination, Siberia. Separated from her father, Lena embeds clues in her drawings and secretly passes them along, hoping they will reach her father's prison camp. In this dramatic and moving story, Lena desperately fights for her life and the lives of those around her. But will love be enough to keep her alive? So, we know this is the opening. That very first paragraph is a quote from the book. Yes.
I've always heard that rhetorical questions are a killer in a query letter. Do you disagree with that? Because there are one at the beginning and one at the end.
Right. Rhetorical questions are very tricky. If you can use them correctly, they can be very potent. But in the wrong hands, they could completely undermine your story. The problem that you're trying to avoid is you don't want me to answer that question with no. Have you ever wondered? No, I have never wondered. Moving on. Will they survive? Yes, they will survive. I can already tell that they're going to survive, and no. So that's what you don't. If it's truly a rhetorical question, that can spark interest, but it's a very delicately done thing. This is also I'm glad you brought this up because it's a subtle difference between writing query letter copy and back cover copy. You're writing to two different audiences there. The query letter is to the editor, to the agent, and so you don't need a rhetorical question because you're going to tell me how it ends, right? But you're not going to tell the reader how it ends because the reader needs to buy the book and give their money to Barnes & Noble so everybody gets paid. And in that case, sometimes a question is enough for the reader to say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna read this." And so that's again something to balance. You had a question, right?
Yeah, you answered it.
Okay. Yes.
I'm wondering about in this dramatic and moving story. That's always rated on me funny when you describe your own story. Is that a no-no or is that just fine?
She's asking about the phrase "in this dramatic and moving story." Again, it's the kind of thing that back cover copy for the consumer usually responds well to things like that. Agents and editors are usually like, "Let me decide if it's dramatic and moving," and that's okay because if you take that phrase out and put in more information about the goal or your hero or something that is really exciting about your book, and you use that real estate to sell your book to me, That's better. Okay, so the opening here is actually a quote from the book. And you can do that in a query letter too. If you have a really awesome passage from your book that showcases your character's voice or that explains the choice and the conflict beautifully, it's acceptable to put that in your query letter. So in this case, it was, have you ever wondered how much a human life is worth? That morning, my brother's was worth a pocket watch. That's intriguing. That's heart-wrenching. So here's the hero. Whoops. Here's the hero. We find out that it's 15-year-old Lena, and we also get the location and time, which is really important because this is a historical novel. So we know that it's set in Lithuania in June 1941. So even with that little bit, I know this is World War II-ish time frame. And because I think I know what happened in World War II, I'm really intrigued why this is set in Lithuania, because I don't think about Lithuania as one of the major players of World War II. So already I'm like, what's so special about this place? Well, it happens to be that there was a huge genocide that happened there, which I found out by reading this book. Okay, here are some of the obstacles that the characters have to endure. There's the Soviet secret police. The family gets torn apart. They are hauled from their home and thrown in cattle cars. They have to go to Siberia, which, even though I've never been, is not a place I want to go. And she's separated from her father. So we have a whole list of things that the character is confronted with and is going to have to overcome. We know what the goal is. She's going to embed clues in her drawings and hope that they reach her father's prison camp. And I'm going to assume that the goal is to reunite her family, because so many of the obstacles were about how her family was being torn apart. And here we have the stakes. She's going to fight for her life and the lives of those around her. And we're going to end, just like we talked about, with this question. And closing it with a question can be dangerous, like we talked about. So if you're going to use it, be really confident that it's the best way to close your query letter and that you don't accidentally invite me to put the book down. Okay, questions about the book paragraph? Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. So this last paragraph is usually, can be the shortest paragraph in your query letter, which is okay, because I just need to know enough about you to trust that you're a professional and you know what you're doing. And if you don't have a lot to say about yourself, easy, tell me more about the book. So these are some things that I might want to know about you as the cook, as the author. You do not have to tell me all of these things. You may want to tell me different kinds of things, but you might want to tell me what your education level is, especially if you have like an MFA from the Vermont College of Fine Arts, or if you have a doctorate in children's literature, or if you took a class in college that directly relates to this particular story you're telling. Things like that can be helpful. If you have any writing organization affiliations, if you've been to conferences, if you're part of the League of Utah Writers or SCBWI or anything like that, again, that's going to tell me you're in this for the long haul. Yes?
For that, do you want only writing organizations that you have heard of, instead of like small organizations in your town?
She's asking about if it should just be like the big, well-known national organizations, or if it can be something small in your hometown. I think if you're any organization that you are a part of, even if it's a small neighborhood writing group, or if you meet at the local library or something small, mention that, because I'm going to read it very quickly, and it's just going to be one more of those little elements that proves that you take this seriously, that you understand that writing is your job, and that you want to get paid for it. Yes?
What if, on the other titles, what if your other titles are completely different? Like, I author technical procedural stuff of work, but I'm writing paranormal, science fiction, fantasy.
Yeah, his question is, what if your other titles are not related to the work you're shopping? I would not mention it. Because if you're coming to me and say, I want you to hire me as somebody who writes paranormal science fiction or something like that, but my only credits have been technical writing in a nonfiction arena. That doesn't necessarily instill confidence in me that you know how to write fiction. That's the thought process that kind of goes through my head. Okay. Now, if you say, I want to write paranormal science fiction, with this particular technological advancement, which I know about because in my job, I have written all of these papers about the hard facts about this science fiction type element. Then I say, oh, he's bringing really interesting, unusual knowledge to this topic that is unlike anything else that anybody else could bring to it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Yes, right here, and then we'll...
Maybe I'm getting ahead with personality flair. Can this essentially be the short bio that we use on like conventions or whatever? That
yes.
Okay.
My personality flair one is why if you come to any of my classes long enough, I say the same thing, that I'm a manager by day, a writer by night, and on the weekends I'm obsessed with supernatural. A year ago, I was obsessed with Doctor Who, but I've now updated that because now I'm obsessed with supernatural. But that's the kind of thing that at the very end you can just throw in and just give me a little bit of flair that I have 4 gerbils named after the Beatles. I mean, just a little something that can kind of say, he's going to be fun to work with. Yes?
So, you say not to talk about things that aren't related to fiction, but on the other hand, what if your awards or honors are related to writing that's nonfiction?
If your awards and honors are related to writing that are not fiction, you could probably mention those. Again, now I suddenly sound like I have given conflicting advice, which I probably have. And I would say that any of these things that you want to highlight should present you in the best possible light. That the most important things that you want me to know. And having awards and accolades for your writing can be impressive, depending on what they are. If you won 5th place in an elementary school poetry contest, probably don't mention that. But if you won 1st place in a chapter contest at Storymakers or at, then that's a little bit more elevating because that's a real honest-to-goodness competition and it's recent and it shows that you're doing something right now. And if you have awards for work that you've done that's not necessarily related, but that to your writing, but that showcases your work ethic or your personality or something, a great accomplishment that was hard to get, that tells me something about you as the writer. Does that help? Did I just totally mess everything up? Yes.
How much self-publishing information would you want?
Self-publishing information, if you have tons and tons of authors are moving into being hybrid authors, or they've started with self-publishing and they're now looking for a traditional deal. And so yes, in this case, if you have other titles that you have self-published that have impressive numbers, 7,000, 10,000 copies in a year, mention that. That is the kind of thing, because that tells me you know what you're doing and you have a fan base, and even though I may not be interested in picking up your self-published works, I'm going to be interested in what's the next thing you can do. Because if you've sold 10,000 copies of your book, I immediately have 10,000 people I can talk to say, hey, you loved his book? Guess what? Here's a new one. And that makes my job easier. Yes?
Let's say you publish your first book with a small publishing house and it doesn't sell very well. Do you mention it in your query letter, even though it didn't sell well?
I would mention that you published it, but you can just leave out the numbers. Because again, don't ever apologize for anything in your story. Don't say, oh, I know I'm just a debut author and nobody will ever want to buy my book. No, don't say that. And don't say, well, I published a book, but it didn't sell well. Don't tell me that. Be proud of the fact that you published a book. That's an accomplishment all on its own. Okay. So here's, for example, this is a really silly example, but I always like to, I was making up an example, 5 minutes, awesome. A romance, Godzilla's Lovers, it was an 80,000 word romance novel that I pretended I wrote. And so this was my pretend bio. Godzilla's Lovers is my 4th romance. In 2013, I published a sci-fi trilogy set in Scotland and was named Best Author in the Universe. I received my degree in flower arranging from the University of Wisconsin, where I live with my cat and 2 gerbils. Now, that's just that can be as short as it needs to be. Like I said, if you don't have a lot of accolades, if you don't have a lot of other published work, if you really are just a debut author trying to get your book out for the very first time and you don't have a lot of history to build your foundation on, that's fine. Tell me one memorable thing about you, and use all the rest of the space to tell me more about your book and sell me on your book. Tell me more about the conflict and the choices and the characters, and how awesome your book is, because I can buy your book based on that, and not necessarily based on who you are or what your history is at this moment. Because everybody's a debut author at some point in their life. So tell me how awesome your book is. And that's what's going to catch my attention most of all. There's me. Yes.
Oh, quick question. If you publish like newspaper articles and articles in other publications, does it help to say, published a dozen articles? Just so you know that your work is out there being edited and
she's asking, is it helpful, like if you've written for newspapers or other or magazines or media kinds of things? Yes, I wouldn't detail every single one of them, but saying I've written a dozen articles for a variety of papers, or I have a blog that has X amount of followers. I mean, things like that. Again, it shows me that you're working professionally, you are hungry for exposure. Things like that can be helpful. Okay, we have like 3 minutes for questions. Yes?
You said the cook section was the smallest paragraph, but is that small even smaller than the hook? I thought you said the hook was the shortest.
Yeah, the hook is probably going to be the shortest, the very shortest part of it, because it needs to be that really pithy kind of grabby kind of thing. But by comparison, the cook paragraph often is just like, just the facts, ma'am. Boom, boom, boom. Here's a little bit about who I am. Please contact me if you want my book, kind of thing. In the very, very back.
How do you transition between these different sections of the query letter?
Her question is, how do you transition with a hard paragraph return? So here's the paragraph. Here's my hook. This is so for example, for Hourglass Door, I would say Hourglass Door is a 100,000 word young adult paranormal romance, a love story with mystery that dates back to Leonardo da Vinci. Boom. Paragraph break. And then I start. Abby's a senior in high school, and when she meets she meets Dante Alexander, a foreign exchange student from Italy, her life is forever changed. Blah blah blah. Awesome book. Then there's kissing and there's smooching and then there's drama and then there's all this kind of stuff, and he has to try to get back, and the danger's all there, and you totally are in love with this book because it's the best book ever, right? Bang. Period. Next paragraph. I have written, I was named best author of the universe when my trilogy in Scotland was made into a movie, and I have 2 gerbils, period. So the transition doesn't have to be super seamless. Let the punctuation break it for you. There was a question over here.
Yeah, so going back to the hook, we were actually in a panel yesterday where someone actually talked about trying to avoid using those little movie taglines and trying to do like a little 1 or 2 sentence blurb that kind of goes into some of the detail that you do in the book part, when you talk about your hero, the conflict, all that. Would you suggest trying to avoid that as an actual part of the query letter? Or
well, no. Yeah, his question was, he was in a panel yesterday where there was essentially some conflicting information that to avoid the movie poster tagline kind of thing, and to really like try to craft something that's the 1 sentence deal report from Publishers Weekly kind of thing.
Right.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because now that I have just explained to you how this works, recognize that you will hear totally different information from another editor or from another publisher. And so that's the other reason why query letters can be hard, is trying to figure out how to tailor it, and what do they want, what do they don't want. Do I do the movie poster tagline because person A said yes and person B said don't do it ever? And I believe that the more information you have of the different kinds of ways to approach presenting your information into a query letter, the more empowered you are to write the right kind of letter for your book. So you may not need a movie poster tagline. You may not find an X+Y kind of example that does anything but hurt your story, in which case don't use it. If you are able to sum up your book in the 1 sentence deal report kind of format, do that. It's all about showcasing how you and your book and what you believe is going to sell your book the best. And you may have to try a bunch of different things. Yes, right here, and then we'll go in the back, and then I think we're done.
I've also heard that if you know something more about the agent, you can fit something in about them to show that you've researched them and actually know who they are.
Yes.
Where would you fit that in?
His question is about, like, if you know something about the agent and want to reference something about the agent, where would you put that in? Often I see that in sort of the presentation of the comps or the genre word count. I see from your website that you like to represent paranormal young adult romance with such authors as X and Y that you pull from the list that they actually represent, and say, I believe that my book title would be a great addition to your lineup because boom, 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 it's totally awesome, and you would be a fool to pass on this book. So that's kind of how you can weave it in without it making it seem like you stalked them. Right here.
What do you do with a storyline that solidly is entwining two stories with two protagonists that may not even meet for half the book? Like, do you pick one, or do you actually talk about both sets of stakes, both characters?
Yeah, her question is, what if you have like two main protagonists that are solidly intertwined? Like, for example, the entire romance genre often does that.
Ones that don't necessarily meet at once.
Right.
Whether stakes or not.
I would if you're treating them both equally, I'd try to condense as much as you can of character 1 in that goal, obstacle, stakes, and character 2, and you just have 4 paragraphs in your story, in your query letter. The hook, character 1, character 2, bio, out. Okay, they're kicking us out, and so if you want to do the workshop,